What prompted you to sort of embark on this one-man vigilante mission against London's fare dodgers?
Well, I was fed up. I saw people dodging on the tube when I was down in London and elsewhere in the country. And I felt that ordinary people who were paying for their tube or public transport, doing the right thing, were made to look silly or foolish by these people who were flagrantly breaching the rules and nothing was happening about it. And so, whilst in politics you do speeches, you do urgent questions in Parliament, and that's important, that's my job, I felt sometimes you've got to get out of Westminster, listen to the public and shame the authorities into action.
What is this a sign of? Because in the video that you've done on this, you link it to shop theft, you link it to the tool theft, you link it even to the existence of weird Turkish barbers, as you call them. Is there a deeper problem here that you're trying to highlight?
Yeah, I think this is one example of many where the fabric of society is being torn apart, is being shredded by small acts of law breaking, sometimes actually very serious ones. Whether it is graffiti, it's people on the tube playing loud music without headphones, whether it's mobile phone theft, tool theft, shoplifting. Many of these things are on the rise at the moment, not just in London, but across the country. And we've got to see the state, the authorities stepping up and taking action. Because I subscribe to the broken windows idea that if you allow one small act of law breaking to take hold, many more people will join in, and then some of those people will go on to commit more serious offences, and the issue will just get ever worse, and it leaves the rest of society feeling that the public realm isn't the safe and clean place that they want to live in, and as if the rules just aren't being applied equally. And so I wanted to highlight this, but it's one of a number of issues that I've been taking up, whether it's tool theft, for example, where tradesmen's vans are being broken into and their tools are then being sold in plain sight at car boot sales across the country, or litter, where you're seeing that, fly tipping in particular, increasing in many communities. We've really got to see everybody step up and take action.
What do you put that down to, Mr. Jenrick? Because, of course, the rules need to be enforced, but we ultimately we rely on people to do the right thing. And what you're saying is increasingly in this country, in Britain today, people are choosing to do the wrong thing. Why?
Well, I think it's partly because the authorities are just not taking action against some of these so-called small minor crimes. And I just don't think that they are minor crimes. I think that they contribute to a broader picture, and some of them are having a very profound impact upon people's lives. Shoplifting, for example, even people who steal small things. This is having a big impact to the point that it's costing everyone more money in rising prices, and it's making particularly independent shops' lives impossible. And in tool theft, breaking into a tradesman's van, it has a massive impact on their life, their livelihood. I've even met or read of tradesmen who have contemplated suicide when they've woken up and found that their tools have been stolen. So these things are actually very serious, and I don't think anyone, whether it's politicians or the police or the courts, should be considering these to be minor crimes. I think they should be taking action against them.
Transport for London prosecuted nearly 20,000 people for fare dodging last year. They've increased the fines for that offence. They're spending £22 million on cracking down on it. This idea that the authorities are turning a blind eye, it doesn't match up to the facts.
Well, I don't think that's right at all, frankly, and I don't think your listeners would agree with you. If you take the example you've given of fare dodging in London, TfL's own statistics show that 1 in 25 journeys are not being paid for, that's costing other users of public transport about £130 million a year, which just drives up fares. I suspect it's much higher than that. As you've seen from the massive reaction to the video I've done today, many people across the country have seen this in their daily lives, and it drives them mad. Just when I was at Stratford Tube Station for about an hour on Saturday morning, I saw people probably every couple of minutes doing this. So I think these problems are much more prevalent than you might imagine. And I don't think the authorities are taking action. Even TfL's own stats suggest that the number of people being prosecuted for fare dodging has gone down. It fell during COVID, as you might expect, and has not got back up to its pre-COVID levels. And when I was at the station, I actually saw 8 officers doing very little, to be honest.
It's easy to call for the police and the authorities to do more. Under your party, the Met budget was reduced by £1 billion since 2010. Over the last 14 years, the budget decrease equates to 32% in real terms. It's easy to go on social media and do these videos saying it's outrageous the authorities aren't doing more. The bottom line is they don't have the resource to do so because your party cut their budgets, Mr. Jenrick.
Well, I don't think that is the case in every instance. If you look at the one that I've taken up, at Stratford Station, there were at least 8 officers there who were supposed to be doing enforcement. Very little seemed to be happening. I even put on the video where there was one officer who was sat with his feet up, doom scrolling on his phone, whilst the gate was wide open and people were coming in and out. They didn't seem to be tapping in and out, so many of them may well have not been paying for all I know.
You are the Shadow Justice Secretary. Did you ask him about that officer?
No, I did chat to some of the officers when we handed over one of the individuals that we'd met, but obviously I left it to them to take whatever action they thought was appropriate. But hopefully I've raised the issue and they're going to take more action now, because from the groundswell of support there seems to be for this one video, you can see that people, not just in London, but across the whole country, want this to be taken much more seriously. And I want, frankly, Sadiq Khan to step up. He's supposed to be the mayor of London. Where's he in this debate? Why isn't he doing more?
And of course, you're right to highlight the need for people to play by the rules. That is, a British sense of fairness and justice is something most people, I think, will understand and connect with. The rules on TfL filming make very clear that you have to have permission to film on TfL property. Did you seek that permission to make this video?
Well, you honestly saying that the blame should be attached to me for calling out rule breaking rather than the people who are actually breaking the law? I'm
simply asking whether you yourself followed the rules that TfL makes clear about
Well,
filming.
I didn't seek permission, because that would have rather undermined what we were trying to do, which was to do...
You broke the rules to make a video about rule breaking, Mr. Jenrick.
Look, I think what you're asking is completely ridiculous. If I had given notice to TfL that I was going to go on a given day and see whether they are enforcing the rules, I think we can guess that it might have been a slightly different outcome. My polite advice to TfL is, instead of taking action against the people who are calling out their inactivity, get on and do your jobs.
But what you're
Take
saying
action against the people who are fare dodging. I think Londoners will be absolutely incensed to hear that TfL are wasting their time criticising someone who's calling out their failure rather than taking action to correct it.
They're just pointing out that you made a video about rule breaking, having broken their own rules yourself. And what you're saying to me, it seems, is, well, if you think there's a good reason to break TfL rules, then go ahead and do it.
Look, if TfL want to take action against me, bring it on. I think what they are doing is completely ridiculous and laughable. They should be spending their time trying to apprehend the people who are actually breaching the rules by not paying for their fares. That is what every single Londoner will be thinking when they're listening to this programme right now.
Let me just ask you about another major issue we're talking about this week, the prisons crisis, the overcrowding crisis. You've been very critical, as others have, of the government's decision to allow further early release of offenders from prisons. They say, Mr. Jenrick, as you know, that they have no alternative because our prisons are full, not enough were built quickly enough to meet the growing number of people being sent to prison. They've got no choice. What is the alternative that you would like them to pursue instead?
Well, first, I think we should build more prisons, and I think the last Conservative government, like most governments in my lifetime, did not build enough prisons. In fact, the main problem actually with the last Conservative government was that it decommissioned old Victorian prisons that were in no fit state before it had the new prisons online. But I think there is an alternative. I don't believe this argument that you just have to release dangerous people onto the streets.
What's the alternative?
What the government has said is they've got to find 9,500 extra prison places in the coming years. Yep. There's 10,800 foreign national offenders in our prisons. We should be getting those individuals out of our country as quickly as possible. There's 17,800 individuals in prison on remand awaiting trial. We need to get those people through the system faster by getting the courts sitting 7 days a week, taking up every possible opportunity to bring cases to trial. At the moment, the government hasn't done that. The Lady Chief Justice, the most senior person in the judiciary, is offering for the courts to sit on more days than the government is currently taking her up on. So those would be the first things that I would do. I also think that there are ways in which you can build capacity at pace. You can use rapid deployment cells, as the last government did, in order to put extra cells onto the sites of existing prisons swiftly. And there are also European countries that have got spare prison capacity where, in extremis, you can reach agreements for them to take our own prisoners. Estonia, I believe, has expressed an interest in doing that. I would be straining every sinew to ensure that we don't release these dangerous prisoners. Unfortunately, the government seem to have reached for the easy lever, which is to release people onto our streets, and that's going to spark a crime wave. You saw just the other day the head of the Met Police, the head of MI5, the head of the National Crime Agency raising the alarm about the serious consequences it's going to have for public safety.